Okay, guys, welcome back to Let's Get Freaky podcast. I've got two awesome guests tonight. I can already tell this is going to be a fun one. We welcome Alex and Dave. How are you, gentlemen? Welcome to Let's Get Freaky podcast, man.
Doing
Thank you. Oh,
awesome.
wait, I did this right? If you do it the other way, it's bad.
Peace. Yeah,
Uh,
the other way swearing. The other way swearing.
Fair enough.
For the listeners, he done the peace sign. The other way
It's
is
not the peace sign. That's
it's
the
not
war sign.
it's not the peace
Yes.
sign. That's something else. Do you know where that comes from?
Where?
So apparently, and I can't remember which side it's on, but Britain and France were having a war, and one of the guns that you use required two fingers. And so what
Mm.
they would do if when they got close to them, they'd chop the fingers off so that they couldn't use them guns. So in the middle of battle, they'd be like, "Yeah, there you go. I've got my two fingers." Apparently, that's where it comes from, and I'm not sure which side. It's probably the British side doing it to the French. Maybe I don't know, but that's where it comes from.
I,
That's why it's
okay. And they went
Yeah,
that right to Begbie and Train Spotting.
yeah,
right.
yeah.
And there was always that joke: French weapons only dropped once.
Yeah,
Yes, never fired, dropped once. Beautiful. And we're banned in France.
yeah. I do
Yeah.
actually have listeners. I've got listeners in France. They're in like my
Yeah.
top six. So I'm sorry to
All
my
right, we
French.
love the French.
Sorry,
We
my
do.
great
we
people.
love the French. We're
Great
just
people.
making a
And
joke.
and my
So
mum lives in France as well. So my mum's listening
awesome.
to this. So sorry, mum. We love you.
No, France is a beautiful country, so definitely nothing against France.
Wow.
No.
So you
We can
guys,
alienate the British by saying that they've been ruled by the French since 1066, but
Yeah.
there's something to be said for that. Yeah, but
so you guys are based in the East Coast, in
yes,
Yeah.
cool part of the world, man. That's where I want to be. I keep
Thank
saying it on the show. You got some weird stuff going on at the moment though, with the drones.
you kidding?
What's
They
going on?
certainly do.
What's happening, man?
Well,
Well,
go ahead, Dave.
so what's truly fascinating, since the election, as people are probably aware, President Donald J. Trump is coming back for his 40s. He'll be number 47. He's coming back for a second term in office. Um, so since this election, over New Jersey, mostly in Morris County, which is so Morris County, if for those not familiar, it's northern New Jersey. It's about a half hour from New York City. As the bird flies, it's about 13 nautical miles, or I think it's actually 13 miles northwest of Newark Airport. So during his last presidency, excuse me, Donald
Presidency.
Trump used to
Sound it
fly
out,
in.
man.
Yeah, I'll try. It's late in the day. But so Donald Trump used to fly into Morristown Airport over here. And all these drone sightings originated around Morristown Airport, going down to his golf course in Bedminster. And now it's just gotten completely out of control. As of the latest news, people are saying, I've seen 50 drones in the sky. They're coming out of the ocean. There was a rumor, and there was on Fox News earlier. They reported that these drones are coming from a mothership
I saw
off
that.
the coast, supposedly from Iran, which, no offense to Iran, but I don't necessarily know they have the technology. And it's kind of like, hey guys, maybe show us a picture, show us a video of this so-called mothership off the coast.
Yeah.
So everybody's freaking out at this point because I've personally seen these drones night after night, especially being, I'm about a mile and a half from Morristown Airport
Hmm.
as the bird flies.
Yeah.
So with that being said, even tonight it's raining, but I saw a drone flying low before.
Whoa.
Now, I think Alex certainly differs on his thoughts on the drones.
Listen, Dave
Uh,
thinks it's the government. He's, as usual, completely wrong. And I will tell you that. Ready, Tommy? It's
Yeah.
aliens. It's aliens. And
Let's
I did my
go.
best Giorgio impression. I it's a tough one. I think it actually might be some sort of extraterrestrial, extra dimensional thing.
Interesting.
The reason I say that is regular law enforcement has not been alerted to what these things are. Otherwise, they would not be using valuable tax time and dollars asking the public, please identify these, please get in touch with us, please do the things that are necessary to let us know what's happening. I mean, these things have been around Picatinny Arsenal. They've been around some pretty sensitive areas. And for, oh, we could say, well, maybe the alphabet agencies are playing gotcha with the police and they don't care what the police know or don't know. Okay, that's possible. But at the end of the day, we know, and a lot of people have talked about the idea of 5D and 3D worlds diverging, things like much more. Bashar, as channeled by Daralenka, has spoken, and many other channels have said that within the next, well, this was already probably 5 to 10 years ago. They said, well, within the next 20 years or so, you're going to have a clear event of connection, not just a C5 kind of thing, but where they come in and do the things that they do, but an actual meeting where it's beyond understanding and beyond debate, I should say. Not to mention, he said, all of our history will start to then be brought to us. It will be fully manifested back, all the things we've forgotten, all the things that have been covered up, all the things. So for me, I have to say, I think it's quite good, you know, to be able to think that it's aliens. Look, a lot of these, they have these shoulder fired sort of EMPs that they can do, that they can down drones and stuff like that. I haven't heard of one of these drones being downed, nothing being recovered, nothing on the news saying, hey, we got these and this is where they're from. Either we're just blithely ignoring this thing, and, oh, look, crazy drones in the country and we have no idea what's happening, or they can't catch them. They can't find them, which means the technology is beyond us.
So at this moment, the government and the mainstream media are saying that they don't know what these things are.
Right.
Correct.
Which is wild, really. I mean, if this is the case, then it's wild. I mean,
it certainly is wild, but let's be honest. Does the government tell the truth?
Oh no, I don't think.
Does the mainstream media, especially in America, I mean,
I don't think anywhere.
I'm not even sure why they call it the news. I mean, it's programming, right? They're programming everybody. There's no news. Exactly. See, my take on this, since this started right after the election, I feel the U.S. government, it's actually the Secret Service, flying drones, because there were so many attempts on President Trump's life. I think they're doing surveillance and reconnaissance in the area. They're surveilling. They just want to get a baseline, see if there's any kind of explosives, see if there's any weapons, if there's any threats. Now, with that being said, I feel like everybody keeps pointing out these things have all these navigation lights on them and everything else. Now, personally, the drones I've seen, a couple times they were just hovering in place, and then they would start moving around. So that kind of rules out predator drones or that type of drone, because obviously those fixed wings, they have to move. They can't just stay stationary. Whereas if they're a rotocopter, or, you know, you get the 4 blades on there or 2 blades, those have a tendency, they could hover, they can move around. What I did find truly interesting, though, was last week I saw one drone that was hovering in place for roughly, let's say, 3 to 5 minutes. And then it just suddenly moved at like a right angle and then just kind of vanished into the clouds or wherever it went to. Now, looking at those recent images from Manchester Airport over there in the UK.
Yeah, very strange.
Those orb-shaped, or the ball that everybody's seeing,
it seems blue like ball. Yeah.
It seems like that's more prevalent in other areas of the world right now, and even in the US, they've been spotted in a couple places. So, what I'm wondering is this military technology that we've reverse engineered potentially, or perhaps it is interdimensional beings that are showing themselves, because
somebody's coming around.
Let's go.
While we're seeing, well, I think it's a combination of both. I think there actually is probably government drones flying, but then there's clearly some other tech being used.
Yeah.
And, you know, here in New Jersey, we're pretty close to Pennsylvania, obviously, across the border. There's what they call the TR-3B. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but it's the triangular-shaped craft, right? There are patents, everything else. There's actually a military base in Pennsylvania where the TR-3B flies out of. Okay. So, with that being said, is it possible sometimes some of this technology that people are seeing, it could very well be the government. But I am not ever going to say I truly believe
Yeah.
I think there's aliens amongst us in society. I think, especially getting into Antarctica and other places.
Hmm.
Yeah, you're definitely not an alien, Alex. You're just weird. But as Alex raises his hand on camera, but there's so many abductee stories with the Greys.
Hmm.
People talk about the reptilians. We could also go back to the Anunnaki. There's so many different alien races, and what's interesting, on our first podcast episode, we had a guest on. He's an astrophysicist. He worked for NASA on the James Webb Space Telescope. He couldn't tell us everything because he's under an NDA,
Yes.
but he divulged some information to us, and he said the life forms that we've recovered, because we have recovered crafts and bodies, and they were silicone based. So they have a triple helix versus a carbon based double helix like we have. I'm not going to say I'm a biologist, so
Yeah.
definitely not going to delve into that.
Yeah.
We're not trying to find out who's a man or a woman, Dave. You don't have to be a biologist. Just talk about aliens.
Well, I think that's up for debate in society nowadays, it
Yeah.
seems like. So,
Oh, yeah.
but that was truly fascinating. And,
Yeah, man.
getting into that discussion, it was just like, okay, so he said the biologicals that were recovered, we asked him, where did these come from? Why did they come here? He said when we first detonated nuclear weapons, that was when suddenly their craft went, like the instrumentation on their craft went haywire, and they ended up coming into our dimension and crashing. And that's why there were so many.
Yeah.
That's why it was so prevalent in the 1940s and 50s, because they were doing a lot of nuclear testing.
Hmm.
And I would posit at this point that I'm not sure we could
there goes
actually use
positing
nuclear
again.
weapons.
Yeah. I agree with Dave 1,000,000%. I don't think we could use a nuclear weapon today if we wanted to. I think we could kill each other very easily with chemical or biological warfare.
Hmm.
But as far as nuclear, I think it's out because nuclear potentially affects, I'm not going to say the timeline, but I think the interdimensional diaspora, so to speak, because
Interesting.
that's what was disturbed initially. So Eric makes a really good point. Let's say you have a little drawing on a piece of paper, two-dimensional drawing. That's what we are to them. They exist in higher dimensions than we do. So they could be here with us, next to us, whatever. We potentially wouldn't even be able to see them or necessarily interact with them, just like a two-dimensional piece of paper drawing couldn't necessarily interact with a three-dimensional or four-dimensional. So he said, when you have, let's say you have a finger that somebody from three-dimensional plane has, and they come towards a two-dimensional piece of paper. So what do you see, right? You see the end of the finger, and then you see the finger leaving.
Hmm.
So when you see things like, the bottom of saucers or other things like that, you're not really seeing the actual shape of the thing. You're seeing what we are capable of seeing based on, it's like having a tesseract or a hypercube, right? So these things are shadows of a larger, more multi-dimensional object that you cannot see in its entirety because I don't know if we're shaped for it. That might be another discussion. And I
Interesting.
wanted to talk about a couple of things in a little bit, but I wanted to make sure Dave's done jabbering about this. So go ahead.
We should
No,
as well we should as well say
but-
the name of your podcast so
Oh,
people
yes.
can go and find it. I'm going to
Brothers
attempt
of the
it.
Arcana.
Yeah, there we go. There we
Thank
go.
you.
Yeah,
People need to go and check that out.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that
Which,
a lot.
much dismay, Alex sometimes
Yeah,
faults me for the name, but we
was-
are Brothers of the Arcana.
there was a debate about the name before we started recording. I won't say what was said, but
I will. No. No, I love the name, but the name sometimes can require explanation. So Arcana, just for the fact of explaining it, is a compendium of arcane things, right? So think of it as a library of arcane things is an Arcana. So we are Brothers of the Arcana. And we're brothers because we're Freemasons as well. And we've been extraordinarily lucky because the fraternity is so broad that we have folks from all walks of life. So a lot of our guests have been that, and we've been able to have people honestly give of their time to be on our podcast, which is so kind, honestly, at the end of the day, and so nice. And it's so kind of you to have us on today.
Oh, it's a pleasure, man. Oh,
And
it's kind of you to come on.
Absolutely, it's our absolute pleasure, and we're super psyched to be able to chat about all kinds of wonderful things.
Hmm.
Dave's our paranormal expert. He's the guy. He's got a million ghost stories. He's been on ghost hunting missions and investigations and all kinds of stuff like that. I'm more the metaphysics, law of attraction, law of vibration, that type of thing, 3D, 5D. That's more my speed
Hmm.
on things. The search for enlightenment, basically. And since we're both from the fraternal angle, I'm not going to say the show is strictly this way, but we talk to men about how men can become better men.
Hmm.
And that's part of the Masonic mission in a sense. And so, the show is somewhat devoted to that pathway, that journey, to how do you become a better man inside and out? How do you become a better person, a better citizen, better brother, husband, father, whatever.
Cool, man.
So,
That's cool. So how did you guys meet? How long have you guys known each other?
I'd say we've known each other about 3 years at this
Okay.
point.
Yeah, roughly.
Yeah, I came into his Masonic district, which is a different part of the state from the one I'm typically at. I came there to be master of my lodge of a new lodge. Dave was at that point first year into his being master of a lodge. So we worked together. Our two lodges worked very closely together, did a lot of ritual together, bonded, did activities, fun things. He had some amazing events that year, including an Oktoberfest. They raised like I don't even know $10,000 for their lodge for charity and all kinds of other stuff, all kinds of charitable things. We fed for my lodge, we fed about 1,500 people during Thanksgiving for a food
Oh,
drive that we
wow.
did. So, Masons do a lot of good. And you read online about all kinds of stuff, obviously, as you might imagine. We're happy to answer any questions you might have on that front if
Mhm.
that's something that's of interest to you. But
Yeah, I find it
uh,
interesting. I don't know a lot about it. Obviously, just what you hear
yeah,
in the conspiracy world. There's a lot of talk as well with the
there
Freemasons.
sure is.
How do
There
you become a
Yeah,
definitely
Freemason? Is it a difficult thing to become, or
not as
what?
such.
it's not a
You
difficult
need
thing.
no, you need to
Uh,
be a man, at
Hmm.
least in America. You need to be a man. You need to be not a felon.
Hmm.
So, it's okay if they arrested you, just they couldn't have convicted you. So if you're still out there in the wild and petition quickly. No, I'm kidding. Um, and and you need to believe in a higher power of some what they call a supreme being. Doesn't have to be Christian. Doesn't have to, it could be Jewish, could be Muslim, could be whatever, but it can't be the flying spaghetti monster of Pastafarianism because that's an ironic religion. So,
Yeah.
you have to actually sincerely believe what you believe, right? So that's that's that. But recently we've had a guy who's a Wiccan who would be interested in joining the fraternity. And they believe in a supreme being, the Great Mother, and even though they have a sort of pantheon of gods and stuff, we have Hindu guys that are in the fraternity. So really, honestly, people from all walks of life. Um,
Interesting.
yeah,
Can I ask? Because obviously you guys do a lot of good, and you
we
support
try.
your local community. Do you think there is different groups that maybe are not doing good, and that's why sometimes there is a bad reputation?
You bring up an awesome point. Um, I'm going to answer quickly, and then I'd love to hear Dave's thoughts on this too. So an article recently came out, not recently, I mean, about a half a year ago, that the Pope put out, Pope Francis, talking about how he's sort of renewing his issue with Freemasons. But in the beginning of the article, he actually applauds American Freemasonry. What he's got a problem with is European Masonry. And one of the reasons is, and not so much British, continental.
Hmm.
And the reason for it is the way that they run and how they do masonry. So we take oaths in America not to interfere in politics, not to use, I mean, you can be a politician and be a mason, but you can't use the fraternity as a cat's paw to influence things. Um, Masons have been in concentration camps under Hitler. They've been in gulags under Stalin. They don't do well in totalitarian regimes because the whole idea of Freemasonry is based on the Age of Enlightenment, free thinking, open thinking. Everybody's sort of welcome under the big tent. Speak your piece. Let's debate it. Let's talk about it. As we know in the modern day, especially with a lot of this more recent wokeism and other stuff like that, they tend to shut down the debate. Anything that's triggering, anything that's this should not be talked about, should not be discussed. That's antithetical to Masonry. Masonry talks, is really about opening that up and allowing the fresh air to get into the argument. So there's people say, look, I believe this, you believe that. But folks use debate now as some sort of a religious exercise where you're threatening their gods, so to speak, these days about that. That's my thought on it. And the fraternity has been there a long time, way before 1717 when it was codified. So you could say it went to the craft lodges that formed the cathedrals and the castles in the Middle Ages. Some people say it goes all the way back to King Solomon's temple and the building of it. Some people say it goes back to the pyramids and the building of those. But that's more conjecture than anything else. Yeah, Dave.
Yeah, and to add to that, that's also Freemasonry was believed to be Noahite originally as well. Story of Noah. But just circling back real quick, you asked the question how to join a Masonic lodge. So I believe you're based in the United Kingdom, so you have the Grand Lodge of England. So here in America, and I'm not sure how this works elsewhere, but every state has its own jurisdiction. What you could do is just look up what's a local Masonic lodge to you. So there's what they call clandestine lodges as well. So you want to make sure they're actually sanctioned by the Grand Lodge of the state or where you are in the world. And what I would suggest, just reach out to them. Say, hey, listen, I'm interested in Freemasonry. I'd like to come check it out. They'll usually invite you to break bread. So that just means go have dinner with them. You'll go hang out with the brothers. They can give you a tour, show you around, ask any questions. You could also ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions because as much as they're interviewing you, but you want to interview them because even where I live, there's a couple Masonic lodges that are actually closer to me. But at the time I joined a lodge that's about a half hour away just because I felt like those individuals were my tribe. Yeah, I just, and I'm not saying like, listen, the lodge that Alex was the master of, fantastic guys, great people there. I'm friends with a lot of them. And Alex and I obviously became fast friends. So we had an incredible year as masters together. It was totally awesome. It was, it certainly made the experience really enjoyable. But with that being said, anywhere you go, you're going to have different people, different crowds. So you'll just find where you fit in best.
Yeah.
And at that point, if you feel that you want to petition, at least here in, New Jersey, we'll just give the person a petition. They fill it out. There's a background check, references they go through. There's an investigation. So the investigation is just more get to know the guy, make sure, is this person joining for the right reasons? Yeah, because as some people could allude to, you read some stuff on the internet. We had a gentleman that tried to join the lodge. He's just like, I want all the secrets. I know you guys are the Illuminati and everything else. It's just like, all right, well, if we knew those, I probably wouldn't be talking to you.
He's not getting in.
No, but that's the thing. If they're joining for the wrong reasons, but like Alec alluded to, we try to do good for the community. We try to do good for the world. We're all on a spiritual journey. We're trying to reach enlightenment. That's really what interested me. The esoteric points, the history, even we have Friday the 13th coming up. Most people don't even know Friday the 13th was Jacques de Molay, and that's actually from the Knights Templar.
Right. So, wow, I didn't know that.
That's what
the King of France
on Friday the 13th.
Yeah,
that's why it's
the King of France actually put out, because France at the time was deeply indebted to the Templars. So instead of paying them back, they just said, all right, we're going to put out an edict that we're going to just arrest, torture, and execute them. So they ended
Cheaper.
up bringing them all in. Yeah, it was much cheaper that way, right? But with that being said, Jacques de Molay was actually the leader at the time. So who was was it Philip the Fourth? Or I don't remember the
Philip the
king.
Fair. Philip the
Oh,
Fair of France.
sorry. There we
And
go.
Pope Clement V.
Right. So
But go on with your bad self. You're doing good.
as this as the story goes, and who knows if this is true or not, but when Jacques de Molay was burned at the stake, he essentially cast, his little, well wishes, so to speak, on both the king and the pope and said, "You're next." And they both died within a couple months.
Whoa.
So, and not to say, I'm sure, maybe that was just coincidence, although I don't believe anything is coincidence in this world.
Same.
But with that being said, it was just, that's where Friday the 13th originated from, but most people don't know that tidbit.
Interesting.
But Freemasonry, great organization. There's other initiatic orders out there. Alex and I are part of other initiatic orders that we won't speak of, but it really truly means a lot to individuals, and you'll meet some of the greatest guys and you make fast friends with people. It's like, and it doesn't matter where you are. When somebody recognizes you as a Mason, they usually treat you like family. So there really are.
Brotherhood. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the world's oldest fraternity.
Do you know what's
and-
interesting? Because I do know Freemasons. I do know Freemasons, and I've actually got
Mhm.
Freemasons in my family
Sure.
Okay.
that I've never spoke to them about it. Is that weird?
No.
It's just,
what
it's
are you
just
waiting
never
for,
came up.
Tommy? St. John's to get here.
I know.
No, I honestly, you should, if you're interested, um, either go with one of your family to the lodge and meet some of the brethren there and go have dinner or whatever, or go on your own. Don't go with them and just
I don't know if they'll
look
let me.
around some of the lodges around if that makes you more comfortable, and meet your own guys and blaze your own trail, right? So, but you're going to meet great guys. You're also going to meet dicks because, in every
Yeah.
other instance in the world, there's pluses and minuses. So let's not put it on a pedestal.
That's just people in general.
Be all end all. Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Of course.
Yeah.
But it is an opportunity. There were times in my life, and I say this relatively often, where I didn't have much, didn't have a job, didn't have this, wasn't getting along with my family. You go to the lodge, you get a hot meal, you get guys who are happy to see you. You get, a smile, you go into a meeting, you see a program, you see something, and then you go home and you feel a lot better, a lot of time. And sometimes it's just that simple.
Mhm.
And it's a potential, not to mention, it's one of the few places still around where you can see a true coming of age, sort of death and rebirth kind of myth thing for a very reasonable cost. You don't have to go take ayahuasca in the forest. Although you could do that, and I ascribe to that. I did it, and everybody should.
Wow.
But,
I'm going to write that down. I'll ask you
yeah.
about that.
Yeah, sure.
Ayahuasca.
It's I didn't do it in the forest. I did it in Jersey, but still, it's
Okay.
Close enough.
I do want to go. That is I have a buddy of mine that's honestly whiter than you, and he is from northern Michigan. He's a Youper, as they call it, and he's down in the Amazon jungle, learning Shipibo songs right now and studying to be a shaman. And
Wow.
he's through the whole thing, and not just doing the ritual. I mean, doing it from soup to nuts, everything. Learning the language, learning the music, playing the instruments, carving the pipes, doing like everything that you would do to be a real shaman down there.
Yeah. Wow,
and
man.
This is what fascinates me. I'll flip the switch a little bit, if you don't mind, to the Enlightenment conversation, because the Shipibo have decided, and he told me this on some level, and they're a tribe of folks that are down there in Peru and the surrounding areas. They have decided that the world is screwed up, and that there are, the things that they've kept to themselves, like ayahuasca and all those rituals, and doing the dietas with all kinds of other plants like Noya Rao, Kirixanango, all these other plants that exist down there that are not psychedelic, but they work with the psychedelic plants, and you sort of understand the consciousness of these plants and you work with it.
Hmm.
They've been doing that for thousands of years, and now they said the world needs this. So we're going to convert the world one person at a time. So whoever goes down there and gets to experience this thing is never the same again. And that's one of the things that I think is so important
Hmm.
to, personally, I think everybody who, before you can be president or prime minister, you should do ayahuasca at least 10 times
Hmm.
and then
That's
go be minister. And
that's
then
what I've
you'll
been
be a
hearing a
very
lot.
different minister.
Yeah,
I promise you.
it changes your worldview and yourself
Well, it
in a
just
very
shows you
positive
how
way.
interconnected everything is, right? So we can't, it's almost impossible to go to war with yourself in essence, because you know that that person is you, you're them. It's
Yeah.
an interconnected universe. We're all this larger mass that we're, inhabiting together.
Hmm.
This idea of separation is a fallacy. It's a total fantasy. And it's one that has been perpetuated, but it's starting to slip.
Yeah.
And we're heading towards that enlightenment ramp.
We are. We do
Um,
seem to be coming as people closer together.
yeah.
Because I think it's sort of obvious that the elites, whoever is running the world, do want to keep us separated, do want to keep us divided, hating each other, tribal. That is 100% what they want. They
Yeah.
want us all arguing about things that really, at the end of the day, we can't change. Yeah, so it makes a lot of sense, man. What was
Yeah,
your?
arguing about drones.
Yeah, we're arguing about drones now. What was your experience on ayahuasca? Can I ask you what it felt like and what the experience was like for
Sure.
you?
Sure. So how do I say this? Let me first say and qualify the fact that I didn't have your typical ayahuasca experience. I didn't go to the jungle. I didn't work with a medicine man. I worked with a buddy of mine who'd done it before, and he'd worked with some people. And we did like the hape ritual, the little tobacco ritual that happens before, which is fascinating because it. So hape, have you ever done it?
I've never done it. No.
So it's basically super, super small grains of tobacco, almost talcum powder small,
Hmm.
right? That are put into a little inhaler pipe, or so you can do it to yourself through this little inhaler pipe, or you have the shaman do it to you. He's got a wooden stick, hollow stick, right? And he puts the hape in one end of it, puts it to your nose, puts the other end to his, and goes, and just blows that up your nose. So when
Whoa.
that happens, you leave your body because the astringency and the acidity of that tobacco, your eyes immediately go red and start just bawling. You've got mucus everywhere, and it's all over the place, and you are like kicked out of your body, man. Like it's crazy. It lasts, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes, and then you come back down and you're perfectly fine, as if nothing ever happened. But it's a
Wow.
wonderful precursor to the ayahuasca or to a mushroom journey or to an LSD journey or to, all of these are different tools that are there for various purposes, right? So, um, but you asked about ayahuasca in particular. So basically, ayahuasca is an interesting one. I did both regular ayahuasca by mashing the vine and sort of taking it. So what you do is ayahuasca is naturally produced in the brain through DMT.
Hmm.
DMT is a particular chemical that your pineal gland excretes. And apparently, it excretes massive doses of this at the beginning of life and at the end of life to sort of tag you into the matrix and then pull you out of the matrix, kind of thing is my thought on the subject. Um, and then what happens is you are when you do this ayahuasca thing, you have to take an MAOI inhibitor because it's something that your body already knows how to deal with. It knows that it can just metabolize it immediately. So you could drink all the ayahuasca potion you want. If you don't have the MAOI inhibitor to keep the blood-brain barrier down, then it will naturally just be consumed in your stomach. And as gross as it is, you'll puke it up or whatever it is. And then you won't have the effect that you're looking for.
Hmm.
If you have the MAOI inhibitor beforehand, it will lower the blood-brain barrier. That's why it's very important to, if you're on some sort of a antidepressant, anti-anxiety, which has MAOI inhibitors associated with it, do not do psychedelics. Let me repeat myself. Do not do psychedelics until you are safely off of those things for months, at least, at the very least.
Hmm.
And I am not a doctor, and this is for entertainment purposes only, but I'm just telling you about my experience. Um, but because you could suffer what's called serotonin toxicity and die, because you don't have, your body no longer has a way to defend itself and shut off the interaction,
Hmm.
because that MAOI inhibitor is open all the time. The blood-brain barrier is down all the time. So one of the ways in which the ayahuasca trip comes to an end is that MAOI inhibitor wears off, the thing that you take about a half hour before you do the ayahuasca drink, and the interaction or the trip comes to a natural end. So I've never had it last for more than 5 hours. Some people have gone 12 hours, depending. If you're seeing smoke around here, it's because Dave and I like to burn incense when we do
Yeah,
our
that's cool,
podcast.
man.
So
Yeah, it looks quite
it
cool. It's
just
quite a
it
cool
sets
effect.
sets the mood a little bit
Yeah,
too,
yeah,
smell wise and everything else sort of gets you
yeah.
into the whole idea. But for us, so you take the MAO inhibitor, half hour later, you take the ayahuasca, you sit down, and you're not going anywhere. First of all, the idea would be to be on a pretty strict diet for 2 weeks before you take it, or you'll pay for it.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is it's going to purge you. You're going to purge, especially the first couple of times. All the stuff that shouldn't be in you is leaving you. And whether it's leaving you orally, anally, in some other way, it's going. So nasally, it's
Coming out your
trust me.
ears.
Yes, absolutely. So it's going. So, the more stuff you have, you stay away from any sort of nitrates, stay away from alcohol, other drugs, hallucinogens, and other things. Don't mix the things. Like, these things are pretty jealous of their own experience. They want you to have that experience. So they're
Hmm.
not, you don't want it to interact with mother cannabis or other things like that, because you know that each thing has its own teaching, including tobacco. So I'm a big fan of tobacco, as is Dave. We smoked cigars earlier today. Tobacco is a teaching plant as much as anything else.
Hmm.
Um, so it's to be respected. But this ayahuasca thing, you take it, and then once it starts having the effects, it's it's you breathing, right? So the air is out there and you're in here, and you're breathing the air, and then all of a sudden the air is breathing you, and then you're not breathing at all, because you're now one with everything. So there's no reason for breath, because there's no
Wow.
separation between anything anymore.
Yeah.
So what happens is, typically you have 3 phases depending on how much ayahuasca you take and how deeply you go into it. There's a kaleidoscope area, which is like the light trip, so to speak. There's a tunnel experience, and then there's on what's on the other side of the tunnel. What's
Hmm.
on the other side of the tunnel is hard to explain, because it's so abstract, and it's so at the very base of creation, so to speak, that you're just, I mean, this is like, it's like where all the pixels start to come together. You could think of it as the angelic plane. Like,
Hmm.
some people call it the blueprint dimension. It's like where, when you're doing the law of attraction or the law of vibration, when you have your initial thought, that's where that goes. And then that's why there's lag,
Hmm.
right? And that, because we experience time as we move forward. So that thing gets put into blueprint dimension, and it's up to you to keep the right vibration, the same vibration as the thing that you sent out, so that it will meet you on the material plane. Do that again. Cool. So uh yeah, it will meet you on the material plane, and you will realize what you've asked for.
Hmm.
So ayahuasca takes you there, and you see crazy things. I saw a triangle riding a bicycle. It saw me, it had consciousness, it talked to me, it got off its bicycle, it was very happy to see me. Oh, blah, blah, blah. It said like strawberry Tuesday triangle, and I said Wednesday strawberry jam banana, and I was speaking its language. It was speaking my language, and we had a great old conversation for a while. Then it got back on its bicycle and took off. I guess it had
Wow.
me. Um, but it taught me so much. It got me to be an actor. I left law and became an actor for 5 years after that,
Wow.
and then that ended with COVID to some extent. But it redefined my life. Yeah, it really did. It opened up a creative spirit in me that I thought had been
Mhm.
gone for many, many years.
Wow,
I
man.
recommend it to anybody that would like to have a change in their lives.
Yeah.
Um, I do say it doesn't come without some level of risk. People have died
Hmm.
through this. But maybe that's because they attained enlightenment and didn't need their bodies anymore. I don't know. But I do say go into this with your eyes open, understand that it's not without risk,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
for
man.
one, my opinion is it's absolutely worth it.
It's very
Um,
interesting. I've got most people that I've talked to that have experienced this. What I
yep.
find so interesting is, as you said, the experiences is always very similar. People are going to the same places, seeing similar sort of entities. I find that very interesting. And normally, 9 times out of 10, it's a positive experience. This changes people's worldview and life and makes them a better person. So I do find it very interesting, man. Do you think the entities that you see
Mhm.
are, this is something I find interesting. Do you think that they are real entities? Or do you
Did you
think
ever see
that is,
did you ever see Cabin in the Woods?
yes, yeah,
Remember how they have the thing of like you pick what you pick in the house, and that's the monster that comes to,
yes, that's a
and you
wild
think,
film.
well, it's all right. And it's all about, did you ever see Hellboy?
Yeah,
The Ogju Jahar, right?
hmm
Laying in the outer darkness. I firmly believe that anything and everything that has ever been conceived of, whether through myth, legend, story, or anything else, is 100% an actual entity. And it's a
hmm
100% thing. It's not a figment of our imaginations. It's something that, if it occurred to us, just like with the Star Trek example, if we can think of it, we're going to make it sooner or
yeah,
later. If
yes,
we've
yeah,
thought of it as an entity or whatever it is, it's because we've received, either through the Akashic records or through whatever, some understanding that that thing is out there. Do I believe the old gods of Necronomicon exist? Yeah, I do.
hmm
um do I, and so on and so forth. So we start talking about Marduk and Tiamat and all of the things that happened with the Anunnaki, where that got mixed in with the Zachariah Sitchin, right, the 12th planet, and how that planet was destroyed. um I think it's, what does Bashar call it? Mendak or something like that, that existed before Mars. He said we started on this one planet, then we went to Mars, and now we're here. And the Anunnaki really didn't mess with us and give us whatever they gave us until we got here. So we were a different species on Mars, and again, something else on that original planet, Marduk or Mendak or whatever it was. So we've been around for a long, long time. We've lost so much of what we were
hmm
and our understanding and our history. It's the universe's ultimate tragedy. But I think we are on the cusp of regaining all of that stuff after this long.
yeah.
And I
Well,
hope we all live to see it, because it should be freaking awesome.
yeah, man. Well, they say we only use, what is it, 10% of our brains? Like, I don't know
That's
how
what they
true
say.
that is, but
Yeah.
if that's the case, there's 90% there. What can we do, man? I mean, I'm sure we can all speak telepathically in the future and stuff, and maybe that's how we used to communicate. But yeah, it's interesting, man. Very interesting.
Well, and even if you look at the use of fluoride, that it affects the pineal gland, your third eye,
Yes.
it clearly they're trying to dumb down society for whatever reason, right?
hmm
And it
Yeah.
seems it's a control mechanism. They don't want
It
us to know these
absolutely is.
things.
You think that's why
Bec-
these natural drugs like ayahuasca and stuff like that are illegal? Because they don't want us touching it. They don't want us to have these enlightenment
Absolutely.
experiences.
I think they've figured out you're not going to stop them in the long run. So let's figure out a different way to control them. So now you're getting weed, you're getting mushrooms in a lot of places in America. Are they legal in Britain yet?
Not yet, no. As far as I'm aware, I don't think so. No.
And so the question is, well, you'll do it, but we'll tax you,
hmm
and for the use of them. And in typical fashion, New Jersey is breaking federal law because New Jersey is the only state in America that actually grows its own weed, which is still federally illegal. Because Jersey's got to get in on the action, and they want
Wow.
to make all the money on doing this. So,
That's why the
good
drones are
job, Jersey.
coming. That's why the
Yeah,
drones are there, man.
well, it could be. They're trying to find the big stashes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe the interdimensional beings are trying to get some fun mushrooms or whatever else.
Yeah, they're
I
coming for
guess
that.
so. They don't have those in wherever they're from.
Yeah.
What would be interesting to note, and Eric brought this up when we talked to him following up. So he goes, and we're like, have we been to the moon? Right? That's a big conspiracy bugaboo. Have
Mhm.
we been to the moon? And he goes, everyone always asks that question. They don't ask the real question. And it's like, why haven't we been back?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what did we find there that freaked us out? Right. So he had that as a thought. And we interviewed Timothy Hogan. I don't know if you know Timothy Hogan, and Scott Walder
Oh,
from the Secrets of the Templars. They're on Gaia Network.
okay.
Awesome guys. We know Tim personally and Scott. They're both Freemasons. But Tim's come to New Jersey. Actually, Dave's Lodge brought them over two years in a row. And we hung out with him. We smoked cigars with him. We drove him around Jersey. So we had a lot of fun together. Went out. He manifested a cell phone. It was a strange thing.
Manifested a cell phone. You got to tell me what that is, man.
Uh, I don't quite know. A friend of ours' cell phone had disappeared, and all of a sudden we were there, and Tim just moves like the napkin on the table, and there's the cell phone,
What, the one
and
that was missing or a new one?
the one that was missing.
The
We
one that
said,
was missing.
"What happened?"
Okay.
And he's like, "I manifested it. I asked that it be returned, and it was." So
Whoa.
you could buy that or
I,
not.
I
It's
could
up to
do with
you.
him in my house. I lose my keys all the time.
He's like Saint Anthony. He just finds
Yeah.
whatever's lost.
Yeah.
No, we're joking. Tim's a good friend, and we love him and appreciate him. But yeah, so that's I started answering these questions, and then I get off on
Yeah,
tangents,
it's
and I
cool,
forgot
man.
if
I
I
like
ever
that.
actually answered
That's
your question or
that's
not.
cool. No,
But I
I
have done a
like
lot
it.
of talking in the meantime, so hopefully I answered your question.
I want to go back to the drones again.
Of
Sure.
course you do.
So, so
Listen, Tommy, you've got a problem. Okay, take it easy. Calm
I'm
down.
very interested, man.
Step
I've
away
s-
from the drugs.
because I've seen things in the sky that I can't explain, like
Yes.
Mhm.
what I would say are UFOs for sure. With these drones, was there ever drones in the sky before this last couple of weeks where they've been seen every day in mass? Was this ever a
No,
thing that happened before?
we
Drones are not
haven't.
allowed in our neighborhoods
They're
for the
not
most part.
allowed.
Yeah. Like actually where I live, because I'm close to the airport, I can't fly a drone without getting authorization from the tower. And even if
Wow.
at that, I could fly a drone maybe 30, 50 feet in the air. So
Wow.
these things are flying in restricted airspace. Supposedly the alphabet agencies don't know anything about it. I don't buy that, but
Hmm.
I will say from that perspective, you're absolutely right. We haven't seen these in the past. There's certainly been stories in New Jersey that people have seen UFOs and other things.
Hmm.
Oddly enough, prior to the election, Alex and I were actually sitting outside one night. We were having cigars before a lodge meeting, and I did see what I would describe as some kind of either interdimensional being or UFO. It wasn't Starlink. I know what the Starlink satellites look like. It was a long, kind of shaped object. There was multiple lights on it, and if you looked at it with the scale of the moon, it was enormous.
Mm.
And I,
Wow.
tr- so here's what was really crazy. I pulled out my cell phone because I'm like, I have to film this. I start filming it. I looked at the screen, 44 seconds filmed. After I hit stop, I had 4 seconds of filming on my phone. And
Whoa.
and I know it was 44 seconds for sure because it was recording the entire time. I could see it on my iPhone. And what was
Wow.
really interesting, it was coming across this, like basically it came across the moon, and then suddenly it just made essentially like a 90-degree turn and just went straight up and just disappeared.
Wow.
And that was a couple weeks prior to the election, so clearly that wasn't a drone. And to me, I was like, I just saw a UFO.
Yeah, man. If you had
And
to guess this, I know it's difficult, but if you
yeah,
had to guess the size, compare it to what would you what would you say size wise it was?
size-wise, I would say it was probably bigger than two or three cruise ships put together. I mean,
Wow.
it was
That's
really,
big.
it was enormous. It wasn't like a small craft by any stretch.
Like a
And
mothership.
and
Like a
again, exactly. And I looked because I actually pulled up, let me see if this is a satellite. I looked, where's the International Space Station? Is it close by? Because maybe I'm just seeing the reflection or whatever else. None of that. All the Starlink satellites, there was nothing in orbit right above us. And I could see some of the other satellites going by because you could see the little dots in the sky just kind of cruising by at a fast speed.
Mhm.
This was certainly something much bigger. And I was just like, wow. And I even said it to Alex right at that point because he's looking at me and he's like, what the hell are you looking at? And I was like, the UFO. So
Wow, man. Was that the first time you'd seen anything like that? Or have you seen
I've seen certain things before. I've had definitely some other experiences where I don't know, like obviously if it was a UFO or not, but certainly some unexplained and weird phenomenon.
Mhm.
Um, I was actually there was one time I was out in Pennsylvania camping actually, and yeah, there's kind of some rustling, kind of like, figure it's an animal or something. And I opened up the tent because the girl I was dating at the time, she's like, what the hell is that? So I popped out with a shotgun because I figured it might be a bear or whatever else. And I look up and there's just kind of this bright light like hovering in the sky, over the treetops. And, you know, you could feel like there was a different energy. And I was just like, what the hell is that? And, nothing happened. It was just like I just looked at it. It was kind of like there. And then just suddenly it was just gone. Like it just
Wow.
vanished. It didn't fly off. It didn't go anywhere. It was just there, and then it wasn't. So to me, it was more like it was interdimensional, where it just kind of it popped in and popped out, so to speak.
Hmm.
And I went back in the tent, and she was just like, "Oh, what was that?" I was just like, nothing. Just maybe a bird or something." Because it's like, how do you even explain that?
Yeah.
She probably would have been like, "You're out of your mind." But
Wow, man. What color
yeah,
was
that
it? Do you
was
remember what color that was?
it was so I would describe it as like a yellowish slash red. Um, it was more towards the yellow side, but
Hmm.
there was definitely some unique lights. Like it wasn't just one light, but the way it was illuminating through the trees, obviously there was like this glow.
Hmm.
And, we were kind of in this canyon in Pennsylvania, which I used to go to this one campground all the time. So, it was probably 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And that was before, back then I still had, I think, like one of the phones that, you flipped open or whatever else. So there was no
Yeah.
camera on it or anything. So
Pictures
it
were
wasn't like,
terrible on them phones, weren't
yeah,
they? Absolutely terrible.
exactly.
Uh,
And I always
good.
wondered because, like, obviously with the TR3B, and the base out there, I was like, was it that? But I just felt, honestly, it had a different energy. There was a weird humming sound to it. It definitely more resonated. And to me, it felt like it was something interdimensional or alien.
Interesting.
So,
I think there's something to that feeling as well. Like when
yeah.
I talk to people that have these experiences, and I've had these experiences as well,
Mhm.
when you see something and you just know it's not normal what you're seeing. Like you know that
Sure.
you're having an experience that is paranormal.
Right.
I think that
Absolutely.
there's a real knowing. Like
Oh,
sometimes
yeah.
you'll experience something, you'll hear a noise, and you're like, yeah, it could be this, it could be that.
Hmm.
And then sometimes you'll hear a noise, and you're like, no, I know because I can feel that that was something. There was something there, and
Sure.
it's a different feeling.
Yeah. And I'm actually an empath. So I feel energies, especially when I do paranormal investigations. I can usually feel the negative energies, the entities that are there, if they're positive, if they're negative, if there's demonic entities, there's that coldness and that feeling. It's just like, oh God,
Hmm.
it's not a comforting feeling, that's for sure. But in this scenario, it was certainly weird. The other thing, there was one time we were actually out. I was on a cruise ship. This was a couple of years back. We're on a cruise in the Caribbean, and my friend and I, my friend Jay, we were actually smoking cigars. You know, well, it's a reoccurring theme, it seems like, right? But it was like, it was probably 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. We had just left the casino, and we're out on the ship. You know, we actually went to the front of the ship, and we're just kind of hanging out because all the lights, for the most part, are turned out. You know, it's people are sleeping. There's really not much going on. And we're just sitting there smoking and hanging out. And I hadn't been drinking or anything else, but there was like it almost seemed like a ball of light that came out of the water and actually kind of came up into the air. And at first we're like, oh, maybe it's, you know, the ship, maybe there's some lights underneath, maybe they have like a problem, you know, because I was on a cruise one time where the propeller broke and they actually sent divers in the water. You know, they stopped the ship, they had divers out there, they're looking at it, they're like, all right, we have to go back to port to repair this. I was thinking maybe it's something like that, maybe it's a helicopter, whatever else. So we were in the middle of nowhere, like we were probably a couple 100 miles from land, and to just see this ball kind of come out of the water. And I know this is a phenomenon that other people have talked about. And actually, on November 13th, there was a congressional hearing here in the United States.
Mm,
They were talking about how there's submersibles that
Hmm.
move exponentially faster than any craft that's human made. And this phenomenon seems to be in the Pacific, the Atlantic. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, it seems to happen everywhere.
Hmm.
And these phenomenon, just these balls come out of the water, and it's just like, but this was going back probably 15 years ago, so this was really before it was talked about in the mainstream.
Hmm.
So it,
Wow.
yeah, that was,
How big would you say that was?
it's hard to say because like it was just kind of this almost like an orb. I would
Hmm.
say maybe it was 5 or 6 feet across at most,
Pretty big then.
but it was hard to tell because there's, you know, it's like
Yeah.
we're next to this humongous cruise ship
Hmm.
and you're in the vastness of the ocean. So it's just like this glowing ball of light comes out of the water, and then it just basically came up and just like it was instantly just like gone.
Wow.
It was like, holy shit, what the hell did we just see?
Hmm.
it was a
Wow.
fart from Atlantis, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. But it was, yeah, that was
Man.
a truly cool experience. And I don't know. It was certainly
Next time
something.
you'll have to tell you about the hot tub ghosts.
I want
Um,
Well,
that as well. You need to tell me
I
that
mean,
now.
I mean, I can get into that now.
Yeah, you've got to. No, you can't leave us hanging with that.
So Alex and I, you know, living in northern New Jersey, the Revolutionary War was here. There's a lot of history, Native American lands. So where I live and where I grew up, I live a half mile from my mom's house, and right behind the house they have what they call Patriots Path. So Patriots Path is where George Washington marched during the Revolutionary War with the soldiers. So Morristown in this area,
you guys know
super
it as a
historic.
small colonial action.
Mhm.
Yes,
Yes,
exactly.
yes, absolutely.
So
So,
the French, the Hessians, and the American troops, the Continental Army, they camped out right around this area. So there was what they called Jockey Hollow. There's there's a mansion down the road. They call it Washington's headquarters nowadays, but it was essentially a family manor that was taken over by Washington where he stayed during the winter. So with that being said, the entire army marched on Patriots Path, and there's various parts of the path all throughout this area. You could hike it. You know, sometimes you end up crossing roads or whatever else. The interesting thing is, right along Patriots Path, one night, this was back when I was in high school, so it was a couple of years ago now, but my friend's father, he had a curfew. So his father said, I don't care what you guys do as long as you're home. You know, because I want to make sure you're safe, want to make sure you're not out doing something stupid, because he said he did all kinds of stupid stuff when he was a kid. So he's like, I want to try to make sure you're not doing that. So So we had to be back at his house by about 12:30. That was his curfew. So we always got there. He lived 4 houses down from me. So, it wasn't a long trek home for me. So the one night, it's a couple of us sitting in a hot tub. So there were 6 people total. And there was no alcohol, no drugs, nothing involved here. As we're sitting there, we're just, shooting the shit, talking, like enjoying ourselves. We look across the street and all of a sudden this person just comes out of the woods. And there's a sidewalk basically like straight across, but the sidewalk ends against the woods. And it's hard to describe, but in essence, you just walk up this path, there's the sidewalk, the woods, then there's buildings that they built recently. So it just ended right there. This person just came out of the woods. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning. We're like, where the hell did this guy just come from? That was weird. And as we're sitting there looking, we're just like, wait, this person doesn't look normal. It was a Revolutionary War soldier marching. And as we're sitting there and we're just all like, are you guys seeing this? We're like, what is happening right now? So he's just marching along. And all of a sudden, when he got up about adjacent to us, he just stops and does an about face and starts coming right at us. So we were probably about 150 feet, maybe, or less. Maybe, let's say 120 feet away. And I realize we use feet over here. So,
Yeah.
should probably need to convert that to meters. But anyways.
I do things in feet.
So as he's walking towards us, it was like something out of a movie. Everybody just jumped out of the hot tub and ran into the house. And he just kept coming straight at us. And I actually, with one of my other friends, we went into the house and we watched. He came straight up to the door. And as soon as he reached the house, he just kind of like, vanished.
Whoa!
So everybody was freaking out. They're just like, I can't go home right now. Nobody wanted to leave. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to go home. I was like, whatever. Like, I've seen so many ghosts and everything in my life. Like, it doesn't even faze me. But, it was just kind of funny. And it was just like, wow. So that was cool. But then fast forward a couple months, we're hanging out in the hot tub. We have a few girls over this time. So it's like, it's nice. You're in high school. It's like, obviously, it's nice to have lady friends who are involved in the hot tub with you.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So this time around, as we're sitting there, we see this person, same type of thing, but this time it was a little bit different. So we see all of a sudden this person come out of the woods, but they're floating. And we're just like, are you guys seeing this? And what it actually looked like was somebody riding a horse. But you couldn't see the horse and you couldn't see part of their body, but they were basically just floating in the air, bobbing up and down.
Whoa.
As if they were riding a horse and the stride of the horse. Exactly. And they just went by and that was it. And it was just
wow, man.
We're all sitting there like, oh, that was interesting. So, of course, the girls were all freaked out, which actually worked out for our benefit because they got closer to us and, wasn't a bad thing. Not complaining about that. But, same house a couple months later. So we had a science project we had to do for our earth science class at the time. So what the project was to do a weather report. So, those old like plasma balls where you put your hands on it and, the electricity basically comes up to your hand and you can move it around on the globe. So we had the bright idea. Let's use one of these plasma balls. I was sitting there I was wearing sunglasses, had a black light behind me. So it was like this psychedelic kind of like weird weather report I was giving. So I go through this whole report. We turn it in. Our teacher calls us down to his office and he's just like, hey, he said, you guys did an awesome job. He's like, but let me ask you this. How'd you guys get that head to come out of the wall? We're like, what? So he pops in the VHS because we'll date ourselves now, but we put the VHS in. He hits play. We start watching it. When I'm doing this report, there's a head that just comes out of the wall, looks down at me, back and forth, and goes back into the wall.
What?
And we're just like,
Wow.
so at this point, he just ejects the tape. He's just like, I'll see you guys later. Yeah, because he realized we didn't do it. It was like, obviously. So,
That's
and then
wild.
there was one other time we saw the Revolutionary War soldier again. This time he was marching, but didn't do the about face and come towards us. So there's 3 times that we saw, what looked like soldiers. I assume they were because they were dressed in the colonial era garb and everything else.
Were they
So,
full-bodied apparitions?
so the first and the fourth ones were. The one riding the horse wasn't
it was
fully. Yeah, I mean, you could still see kind of the outline of the leg or whatever else, but it wasn't a full operation. And the head popping out of the wall, that wasn't a full operation. It was just the head, which was kind
So
of
I had the
interesting.
head popping out of the wall too, but for me, it happened with ayahuasca, where my buddy was on the other side of the room, and all of a sudden she pops out of the wall, looks at him, and goes, and then pops back into the wall like he's having a thing, like because I was
Whoa.
like deep
So,
in it at that
so
point.
is that grandmother coming out of the wall?
Grandmother itself? Yeah, absolutely. I didn't see the
Yes.
snake imagery. There's a lot of people see like a huge
Yeah.
snake. I did not see that, but I saw a whole bunch of other stuff. What's funny is any of these trips, if you're having a bad trip, you got to laugh at it, because what's happening, you're seeing all these demons, all these things, they're scary, they're all this stuff. And I started laughing, and then they start laughing, and everyone's laughing. It's like the demons aren't there they're there to give you a message of some kind. And the universe, first it whispers, then it, pats you, then it knocks, and then it grabs a 2x4 if you're not paying attention. But like, at some point it needs to get your attention. So, it'll do what it needs to convey these messages, these lessons to you. So yeah.
Yeah.
Do you
And
do you think
go
with the
ahead.
paranormal we see things, like some of us see things sometimes, like we get glimpses, we
Sure.
see things, shadow figures, whatever, we
Mhm.
see stuff. Do you think with like DMT and ayahuasca and drugs like that, we are just opening ourselves up? We're kind of having a similar experience, but we're sort of with the drugs, it's opening us up more. Do you think that's what
I
is
think so.
happening?
I think it's kind of like Cabin in the Woods. Like these things exist in their own little compartments, and however they manifest themselves, they do. And it's not always bad stuff. Obviously, it can be very
Hmm.
good stuff, very interesting out there stuff. There's all these dimensions and pocket dimensions and other stuff like that, where these things that you want to go to Fae and speak with the fairies. I mean, and
Hmm.
I'm going to butcher this name because I always do. All my Irish friends are like, that's not how it's said. But the Tuatha De Danann, the ones that turned into the raindrops and disappeared. Well, I mean, just think about what that entails. I mean, that's the best they could describe it of what they were seeing. Because when the I guess the Saxons it was that ended up going there, they were peaceful people. They didn't want any trouble. And the warlike people came and they said, well, screw this. And they just turned into a new dimension. So I'm sure that they exist today in whatever dimension they've transported themselves to. Now they had the
Interesting.
use of being able to do that through things like Markabas, I'm sure. Right. So you know about Markabas and the kind of some of that kind of I'm blanking on his name. The guy who wrote the Illuminatus trilogy. And uh it'll come to me.
I'm
But
terrible with names. I'm terrible
yeah,
with names.
yeah. It's a 3-word name. But anyway, very interesting to say and to see we're on the cusp of finding out what our real powers and our real
Hmm.
place in the world and in the universe really is.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm so excited by that possibility.
Yeah,
I think it's
Oh,
just
yeah.
maybe that extra 90%, if we ever get even another 20% or whatever it is, maybe we will be able to just walk in and out of different dimensions. Who knows? There might be
Yeah.
you saw
with
Lucy, right? With Scarlett Johansson. I don't know if you saw
yeah.
that
I've
movie.
not seen the
And
whole movie, but I know what happens, and
it
yeah.
it it gets at it gets you should see it. And there's another movie called Limitless.
Oh, I've seen that.
Where
Yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
film.
what was the interesting part was at the very end of the movie, remember what De Niro does? He tries to take over all production of that chemical so he could control Bradley Cooper's character.
Hmm.
But by then, Bradley Cooper's character had already metabolized this thing. And he's just like, "Do you think I need the chemical?" That was just a permission slip to get
Hmm.
myself. So what we're doing, we're the ones doing it. When we heal ourselves miraculously, we're the ones that are healing ourselves miraculously. When we're doing all this stuff, when we're traveling to ayahuasca land or wherever it is, the ayahuasca is just a permission slip that allows, it's like a thing that holds a space, right? So it's this tunnel or a room that couples to your consciousness, and then you're able to now have access to travel to wherever you're going. But once you've done that several times, you don't really need the tunnel anymore. You don't need the contrivance anymore
Hmm.
because you can connect to where you were going. Um, and in my better instances, I can do that from time to time.
Interesting.
Um, yeah.
Because you can
Yeah.
do
Yeah, and
you can get there through breathing and stuff like that. There's like ways.
yeah,
Drums.
through
You can get there
meditation,
with
drums.
drum circles,
Right.
with breathing, with all kinds of stuff. We had an interesting phenomenon happen with a brother of ours who was actually on the show, Brandon Cornblue. He came in and I did a presentation on the power of vibration. He wanted to take it a step further and basically demonstrate that through a drum circle. So he brought a bunch of different drums. People sat down and they were, so two things happened that were very interesting. And it was Dave's Lodge. Um, where it happened, which is fascinating. Number one, people were very skittish to get on the drums in the beginning because they're like, we don't know about this. I've never played drums. It's weird. I don't want to look like a jackass in front of all the other guys. You know how guys are. Some of us who've done it before got on the drums, and he said, keep the beat, and then start drumming at your own pace or whatever it is. But as you're drumming for long enough, the beat starts to coalesce. Now that you're trying to do it, it ends up harmonizing, and you all come into convergence so that the whole circle is now in the mix. And
Hmm.
whatever you're doing, it's working with the stuff that everybody else is doing, even if you didn't mean to beforehand. And what that did, number one, was show that something happens outside of your control in the drum circle that brings all this stuff together. A harmonic convergence happens. And then those other guys that didn't want anything to do with the drums couldn't wait to get on the drums the second time around when they tried it again. Because now they saw not only is this thing really cool, but there's an attractive quality to this that we want to be a part of.
Hmm.
Something about this vibration is good. And it means that, whatever we do, it beats out on our fear of, not looking like idiots or whatever it is.
Hmm.
I found that absolutely fascinating from so many
Yeah.
different perspectives, right? So the vibrations are
Interesting.
Yeah.
all coalescing in a really cool way there.
Hmm.
Well,
Interesting,
and
man.
that's what I would argue because I think the paranormal and even these interdimensional beings, it's all very similar, right? I think the paranormal, clearly they're always here.
Hmm.
They're right next to us,
Kind of.
whether people see them or not. I mean, there's so many people, like even I always liken it when people say, well, I don't believe in that. And I just ask them, have you ever walked into a building or a room or somewhere and you feel a bad vibe and you're just like, I don't like this place? I
Hmm.
said, what do you think that is? Do you think it, I mean, sure, it could be residual or whatever else of a past traumatic event, but
Hmm.
you're experiencing that firsthand.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like even we had a really fascinating guest on, Palo Santo. He, during COVID in March 2020, he was traveling, he got home, he was really sick. He ended up essentially, he was talking to his wife while in the ER, and he's just sitting there on his phone. And he said, next thing he knows, his
Like
wife
this.
sees the ceiling, and he had flatlined. So when he flatlined, he had what's very similar. You hear all the stories about the out of body experience.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
So he said he saw the nurses in the back of the room praying for him, saying, it's not his time, it's not his time. He said he actually watched the doctors go home, watched what they ate for dinner, watched them hanging out with their families. He saw all these things. Then he felt he died because all of a sudden, everything, he was still in the hospital room. It all went dark. And next thing he knows, this person walks in that he thinks was an angel. And it was really dressed as a doctor. And he said, "Am I dead?" And he said, "Yes, but I'm going to give you a gift." He said, "Okay. So what's that gift?" He said, "I'm going to let you see anything you want." So he watched his kids grow up, his grandchildren grow up. He lived millennia, and he saw all these scenarios of whether he lived in that lifetime with them or without them and the differences.
Wow.
He said he even worked for 3 years in this dead state. And the fascinating thing was when he came back, he he was a programmer. So he took those 3 years of work, he put them into a program, and now he works like 4 hours a week. So he leveraged
Brought
what
back
he
knowledge
did.
from the other side.
He brought back knowledge from the other
Wow.
side. But it's really cool because he said immediately, and I don't want to give away the whole episode in case anybody ever wants to listen to it, but
Yeah, please watch that. I mean, watch all of our stuff. It's awesome.
Yeah, man,
but
for
but
sure.
but
For
he
sure.
literally said, as soon as the guy came back after he got the gift, he said, "All right, what's next?" He said, "Well, now you're going to hell."
Hmm.
And he's like, "Wait, what?" He's like, I was never a bad person." He said, "No, everybody goes to hell." And he said for the first couple weeks, because now time became real again, it was just a plaque on the wall, a bronze plaque that said, "Keep the temperatures between 68 and 72 degrees." That's all it said for weeks on end. And then the plaque started tormenting him. It started saying, "Where's your God now? Aren't you happy you went to church all those Sundays?" And it was just
No, no.
taunting
Wait, hang
him.
on a second. Don't mess this up because this is important. So so the plaque first off, he goes. It says, "Weren't all those Sundays you spent in church a waste?" And it just said that, and there was nothing. Nothing had changed about the room. Just this plaque kept changing the messaging on it and just messing with them. But honestly, please do check out the podcast because
Yeah,
it's
man.
the way he explains it, the story, it's
Yeah.
absolutely bone chilling. Number one, and number
Hmm.
two, it goes to show you there was a woman demon and a man demon, and they both tormented him in different ways. But that was the whole thing. It's like hell is almost, at least the way he saw it, was almost like a rite of passage. After you're dead, after you see everything you're supposed to see in your life and go and
Hmm.
do all the various things, then you go to hell. Hell has its particular effects on the spirit. Then you go to heaven, and then you see other things, and then he was able to come back based on a certain set of events involving his wife, who's a nurse, and was able to get a certain drug for him that was able to pop him back out. But yeah, they're going to do
Whoa.
a movie on him. I think they've already done a book on him. Really, really
Wow.
fascinating stuff.
How long was he out for? Like in our world?
He was in the coma for it was from March 17th, actually, St. Patrick's
Yeah, to
Day,
April 7th or
until
something,
April, yeah, it was like April 4th or 7th or sometime
which
around
was
there.
like his actual birthday. He woke back up on his birthday.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But he didn't realize he was actually alive again. That's
No,
actually
that was
kind
the
of
other
the
thing.
fun part of
So
the
he
story.
was in a psychotic state. He tried to kill himself. He tried to kill all the doctors, the nurses, anybody who got close to his bed, because he thought he was still in hell,
Wow,
and
man.
that these things were messing with him. So, yeah, really something.
Whoa.
Yeah.
What episode is this, guys? Because I need to check this out. The
That was
minute we
I think
finish
it's
this
episode.
conversation.
episode 7.
I would say
Okay.
episode 7. Yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah.
check that
And,
out. Wow.
and what Alex was talking about with ayahuasca, DMT, psilocybin, that type of medicine journey. Second episode we had a Masonic
Nestor
brother on,
Ramirez. Yeah.
Nestor
Wow.
Ramirez. He did the whole jungle, and he said it was like he basically within his ayahuasca trip, he was there for what felt like a year
Hmm.
minimum
Mm.
in one night. And he said
Wow.
it completely changed his life. When he came out of it, he loved life, he loved the world, he made peace with everything, and really the way he explains it and describes it's really fascinating and really interesting.
Yeah.
Um, Even our last episode, we just had Carl Petrie on, who Carl is a medium, but he has a couple unique abilities, which, he has retro viewing and retrocognition.
Hmm.
So he's able to put him, like, he could look at a photo and he could actually go into the photograph and see who took the photograph, what was going on. He could
Wow.
interact with the people that were there, see the sights, the smells, other things. And, uh, that was a pretty interesting episode as well. But,
Wow, man. All
you know,
these episodes sound amazing.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
on it.
but
Thank you. Thank you so much.
we
We would love
appreciate
to
it.
get
And,
your thoughts on
uh,
it.
uh, uh, uh,
And
I mean,
yeah,
a common
we're
thing that
not.
you hear with like
Mhm,
the other side, wherever the other side is, where people
mhm,
are having a DMT experience or a near-death experience or
yeah.
whatever it is, on the other side, whatever that is, time seems to be completely different to what time is for
Yep.
us now. There seems to be a complete like there's no time basically, and
Well,
and that
right. Time
seems
is
to
a
be
construct.
yeah a theme that keeps coming up.
So in our first episode with Eric Matson, we actually talk about time dilation and
mm,
that some of the stuff from an astrophysics perspective, I can't do it justice by explaining it, but the way he explains it, he dumbs it down enough that you could understand it, but it is truly fascinating. Like he's saying if a craft is traveling at the speed of light away from Earth and you're watching it through a telescope,
Hmm.
it's just like basically time standing still for them. But even though the clock's still moving, but when they came back, you're like, you've been dead for a couple thousand years at that point.
Yeah,
It's like there's just all these things that are truly fascinating. But
yeah, man.
I did want to tell you a quick story.
Yep.
I think from a paranormal perspective, I think you'd enjoy this one. So in Morristown, there is a famous, it used to be a venue actually. It was called Jimmy's Haunt. So it was the Sayer house. So Samuel Sayer, his wife Sarah, and servant Phoebe lived in a house, and this was back in the 1800s. So they had a Frenchman named Antoine LeBlanc. He came over here as an immigrant. He started working for the Sayer family. So he kind of got, my understanding is he got really pissed off because he felt like the slave Phoebe was treated better than he was, even though, she was of African American descent and he was just a Frenchman that came over. So he ended up bludgeoning the Sayers to death and he killed Phoebe. My understanding, and th- I know this just from, so Antoine LeBlanc, because he was in Morristown and because our friend who's a medium used to have an office where Dr. Canfield, and I'll get to that in a second, but in essence, after he bludgeoned them, killed them, he then supposedly raped Phoebe, her corpse. He then stole their fortune, and as he's riding off, he starts dropping all of their silverware, whatever else. So the sheriff at the time was able to track him down pretty easily because he left this trail behind him. So they end up apprehending him. They had a quick trial. They sentenced him to death. He was actually the last public hanging in Morristown. I think it was September 6th, 1833. But after he died, they ended up doing all kinds of experiments on his body and they skinned him and made him into wallets and other things. So if you go to the Morris Museum or you go to the courthouse, there's still a death mask that they made of him. And there's actually the skin wallets that the sheriff or whoever, the police were at the time, they actually made him, and signed them. So there was bookmarks, there was
Whoa.
lampshades, there was all kinds of things that desecrated his body. But our friend Dorothy had an office at where Dr. Canfield's office was, and Dr. Canfield's the doctor that did all these experiments and actually skinned him and dried him and everything. So, her being in this office, we were actually interacting with Antoine all the time. He's still there, and he said he's stuck in purgatory, and part of the reason he's stuck in purgatory is he still won't accept that, he desecrated Phoebe. And what's interesting is that Jimmy's haunt, which was the mansion, all the staff members and everybody used to say they had all kinds of weird paranormal phenomenon constantly. Whether there was a dumbwaiter in there, the thing which was an elevator they used just for, silverware and other plates and other things go between floors. The thing would just run on its own, it would stop functioning, and then it would just open on its own or do whatever else. The lights would turn off and on constantly. There was just all kinds of things. Funny story now, they had, unfortunately, they knocked down the building. They built a bank there. The owner of the place moved down the street to another venue, which is called Iron Bar. If you go to the stairwell in Iron Bar, there's an image on the wall of what looks like the devil, basically. It's some kind of demonic devil creature. And when we asked Jimmy, who owns the place, why did you put that in the stairwell? He said, well, that's what I used to see at Jimmy's haunt. So, and then what's interesting is Iron Bar used to be the receiving vault for a cemetery that was on the Morristown Green that they'd also moved later on to Evergreen Cemetery in Morristown, which is a really interesting place. Non-denominational cemetery. A lot of Freemasons.
Tell them about the Potter's Field.
Oh, God. Well, yeah. So in Evergreen Cemetery, there was a mental hospital here in New Jersey. Well, there's several, obviously, but there was one called Greystone, which was local to the area. So supposedly during this time frame, the who's who of the world, if they had mistresses or, let's just say they accidentally got their mistress pregnant, they would have them committed to a mental hospital. They would then murder them, essentially, by torturing them or doing whatever terrible deeds to these individuals. And then they buried them in the Potter's Field at Evergreen Cemetery. They estimated there might be up to 120,000 graves there in that Potter's Field. But the rest of the cemetery is really interesting. I go walk over there all the time, especially at night. Like, there's definitely some cool phenomenon and a lot of paranormal activity.
Do you see things there?
Yeah, I've picked up apparitions. I've actually, one time, one of the most interesting things was I was walking next to a grave, and all of a sudden I smelled what smelled like burning flesh. It was a really nasty scent. It was just like, what the heck? And I looked down and I see it was 2 children that were buried there. And when I looked it up, they were actually killed in a house fire. So they had burned to death. So I was, I guess, smelling them.
Yeah.
And they kind of just came out to visit. And I've had a couple demonic experiences in that cemetery too. There's several individuals where they definitely have some negative attachments to them. And I think that's why they ended up perishing. And they're still in the afterlife, obviously, still probably having the demons. But for a while, I will say Antoine LeBlanc used to completely mess with us all the time, because like if I went over to Dorothy's office, he would turn out the lights. He would end up making her computer or printer. Like sometimes her printer would just start printing out pages with like random characters and other stuff on them.
Yeah.
Like even at one point, she actually turned her computer off, turned off the printer, and it was a USB printer. So it's like there's no wireless or anything on it. And it would just be printing these cryptic and weird messages on there sometimes. So
that's wild.
It was certainly interesting, but it's a little tidbit of history too.
Have you always had this ability, seen things, sensed things? Was that from the start? Was that from being a kid that you had this?
Yeah. So, but when I was a kid, I didn't understand that. So when I grew up, like I said, I grew up on Patriots Path. I would say my parents' house is super haunted. There's a lot of different entities there, and it was Native American land. It was formerly a farm, apparently, years ago as well. But with that being said, I always used to tell my mom I would talk to God in my room. I saw all kinds of weird entities. I think I saw maybe what I would describe as like a fairy, or maybe it was a djinn or something. Like I've always just encountered all these weird and strange phenomenon. And obviously as a kid, I guess growing up, I have no idea why, but it's like I used to watch like all these different movies like Poltergeist, Pet Cemetery, like
and
looking
we don't
back
help
on it,
ourselves.
looking back on it, it's just like, why was I watching that as a kid? But I was always fascinated with the paranormal.
Hmm.
When I walk through cemeteries, I always find it super peaceful and enjoyable. I mean, granted, there's sometimes you feel that heavy energy or whatever else, and it's just like, all
Right.
right, they don't want me here. But
Hmm.
yeah, I've always had that experience. I don't always see things, but I've certainly seen a lot.
Hmm.
Even with my ex-wife, there was actually a shadow figure that used to stand over our bed all the time when we lived in this one apartment.
Hmm.
Um, and she used to tell me like if she slept in the living room, like she'd sometimes fall asleep on the couch watching TV, and she'd come to bed and be like, "That friggin' shadow man was here again." Like it's a tall, shadowy figure that's always here. So,
Wow.
and I felt that he was just attached to that apartment for whatever reason.
Hmm.
Um, One of the funniest things was there was one time we were down in Florida on a golf trip. My friend Mark, so we get into this, we stayed at like an Airbnb. So it was a 4 bedroom place. So he said, you know what? You booked it. Why don't you take the master bedroom? Sorry. All right, cool. Whatever. I don't really care. It's like I'm just here to play golf and sleep and, have a good time. Doesn't matter to me. So I go upstairs, I open up the closet to hang up some clothes. And inside the closet, there's this little door. So probably like 2 feet by 2 feet, maybe. Um, and I'm like, that's really random and weird to have this little door inside the closet. I opened the door and I was just like, whoa. You could just feel the negativity and the energy. So I
Wow.
immediately went because we had flown in and we'd played golf, and I was just like, I got to take a shower. I go to take a shower. I'm shampooing my bald head, of course. I put shampoo and conditioner on it, folks. Got to keep it moist.
And a beard.
And
You got to do the
He's
beard
got
as well.
he's
well,
got
I
high
do the
hopes,
beard,
folks.
yeah, absolutely. So as I'm standing there, like just with my eyes closed, I see this little girl, and she's very, you could tell, she was old. She had this, not to say she was old in age when she died, but clearly she was like this little girl that was just very scary looking. And I was just like, okay, so you're the entity in the closet. And like somehow I was kind of communicating with her, and I'm like, listen, I'm only here for 3 days. You do you. I'll be over here. We're going to be playing golf. Like, we're good, right? And it was just
Wow.
kind of like, yeah, cool. So she left me alone. So the funniest thing is the last night of our trip, we're having dinner, and my friend's like, oh God, I hope I can sleep tonight. And I'm just like, why? You haven't been sleeping? He's like, dude, I haven't slept since we've been here. I'm like, why? He's like, I don't. And then I said, the little girl. And he's like, wait, you knew about that? And I'm like,
He was
yeah.
seeing it too.
I was like, the little girl in the closet, right? And he's just like, you. He was like cursing at me. And I'm just like, yeah, I just told her to leave me alone. I was like, she's cool. I was like,
Wow.
she definitely has some issues, but I was like, she's fine. I was like, why didn't you just ask her to leave you alone? He's like, you could do that? I'm like, why can't you? So
Man.
the last night she came, apparently she was like completely messing with him every night. And I,
Wow.
the last night she came into his room and he's just like, hey, can you just let me sleep? And she's like, okay. And he slept like a baby that night. He said, he's like, why the hell didn't you just tell me when we got here? I'm like, I don't know. I didn't think anybody else saw her.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah,
That's wild, man.
it was definitely
You're
funny. It
braver
was
than
just,
me, brother. I can't. Kid ghosts, especially for whatever reason, are very
yeah.
scary. And I would be out of there. Night one, I'd be gone.
Well,
Wow.
so it's kind of funny. I belong to two paranormal societies. So we have Revolutionary Paranormal Society here in Morristown area. We also have Ghost Seekers International. So we're actually partnered up with Stephen McKinley, who lives outside of London. So back in 2020, we were actually supposed to come film at the Jack the Ripper Museum and other places in the UK,
Oh,
but
wow, man.
it was scheduled for September of 2020. Of course, COVID happened. That got derailed. We still
Hmm.
haven't resurrected that, but we were trying to
Wow.
set out to scientifically prove the paranormal exists. That was really what we were trying to do. Um, and I know, like, obviously, there's all these shows on TV that they're using all the gadgets and everything else. Some of them work great, some of them don't, but
Hmm.
you know, that would be a cool thing because I just feel like we want to give credibility to the paranormal realm because so many
Right.
people are just like, I don't believe in that shit. It's just like, whatever.
And they've normally had an
But,
experience as well, which is what I found.
well, of course, but a lot of times they chalk it up to something, right? It's just
Yeah.
like, it was swamp gas, like in Men in
Mm.
Black or whatever else.
Yeah.
It's just, I think a lot of people have the ignorance is bliss mentality,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
to me, I'm not afraid. Like, I don't know, like my medium friend and the person in the paranormal society with us, she actually uses me as like her guardian because she's just like, you're like fearless.
Hmm.
So whether it's demonic, whatever else, I'm just like, whatever. And
Yeah.
Alex could tell you there's actually a place we go right by Congdon, Alex, in Morristown and Tempe Wick Road.
Oh, one of my favorite houses. So it was built for an Austrian princess, believe it or not. She died in the house, and it's called Glenalpin Mansion. And I drove by it, and I had this mania of like driving onto the property and like checking it out. Even though it is private property and you get on camera if you go down there and all that stuff, but I don't know what possessed me to drive by there at night, and even you're not even on the property, you're on the main road itself. And I felt this thing, and I don't know, I was like, let me fight this fear. And I drove onto the property on my own. And I was like, as the car was inching forward, you just feel the heaviness, the coldness getting worse and worse and worse. And either side. So I freaked myself out so much. I was like, all right, I K-turn and get the hell out of there. A couple of days later, I see Dave. And I'm like, Dave, let's go home a different way because I was driving him back to his place. I was like, let's go home a different way. And he's like, you're gonna take me by this place, aren't you? And I was like, yep, for sure. So I drove him by, and he'd been there before, I think, but not at night. And I was like, what are you seeing that I'm not seeing? Because he can see something. He's like, I'm seeing demons. They're all lined up in a row. And I mean, you tell him, I mean, what you saw there was crazy.
Yeah,
Whoa.
so here's what's interesting about this though. The night before, I had a dream and I saw the high grass and all these demons surrounding this area with this high grass, and I didn't know where it was or what it was. And
Mhm.
when Alex drove in there, the moment we got there, I'm just like, oh, this is the dream I had last night.
Wow.
And I actually could see, I'm like, that's fine. I was like, just tell them to F off. I'm like, whatever.
Wow, man. What
And
did they look like?
he's, um, there was all different types of demons. Like there was, well, there was probably 8 to 10 of them, I would say.
Uh-huh.
And, a lot of them just kind of had, more like the skeleton type faces. Not all of them had horns. There was two with red eyes. There was another one that, it was more like you couldn't really see the eyes, but it was like a darker shadow.
Hmm.
Um, but they were definitely like big, burly looking creatures. And, one of them almost looked like a centaur kind of thing, and or centaur, however you pronounce it. Sorry, but
Centaur, yeah.
the the whole
Wow.
thing, like I've seen a lot of, it was kind of funny because some of my interactions have sometimes they've been interesting, sometimes they've just been ridiculous. But when I first got divorced, I should say when I was first separated with my ex-wife, and my ex-wife was a lovely person. We just, decided to part ways because she actually didn't want kids at that juncture of life. And she's like, you know what? You want children. I don't. Like, we'll go our separate ways. So right after that, I was kind of down. It wasn't the best time of life, right? So I ended up going out one night. My friend's like, hey, let's go out. So we're out in Morristown. I end up meeting this girl. She's she seemed really cool. So I started hanging out with her. And since I wasn't divorced, I was like, I'm not dating or anything else, but I was like, this is a person, just to be a companion, kind of hang out with. It's like if they're the opposite sex, it's like at least I can get a different perspective.
Hmm.
So as I'm hanging out with her, I'm just like, something seems off about this person, but I couldn't put my finger on it right away, right? And after I was hanging out with her for a couple weeks, and then like the one night we go out and we're sitting in this person's backyard, and then we start hearing these growling noises and this like screeching and all this other stuff. And I was just like, what on earth is that sound? And everybody was hearing it. And she's like, oh, I hear that all the time. I'm like, wait, what? I was like, what do you mean you hear it all the time? So we get in the car, I'm driving her home, and she says to me, she's like, yeah, I hear that. And she's like, I hear these voices all the time, but I don't understand what they're saying. I'm like, well, what do the voices sound like? She's like, they're really deep and kind of raspy. I'm like, oh, alrighty. So I
Alrighty.
drop her off, I get home, and I was it was like I remember this distinctly. It was 1:14 in the morning. I would go to sleep. And as soon as I closed my eyes, I hear this growling, and then I start hearing this chanting of her name. And I opened my third eye. Like, I don't know if I was sleeping yet or whatever else, but I opened my third eye. I see this shadowy figure on the left, and on the right, there's this goat horn faced demon with big horns, red eyes, and it's chanting her name. And
Oh
I was just
man.
like, I was like, holy shit. I was like, oh. So it was like 1:17 at this point. I literally pulled out my rosary beads and started praying for her. So funny thing is, the next day I go to Morristown. I see my friend Dorothy, who's the medium. I walk in her office. She just throws rosary beads at me. And she says, now do you see why I told you to stop hanging out with that girl?
Man.
Because she was possessed by a demon.
Well,
And
how was she after that? Did it calm for her or?
well, so, it's actually
In
interesting.
Dave's defense, this is most of his dating life, though. Like, it's possessed
Thanks, Alex.
women,
They've all got
you know,
demons.
devil
I,
disciples, so
I,
on.
I guess they just see the light and they come
It's really
towards me.
maddening, actually.
So, it was actually pretty cool. Like she reached out to me, because this was back in 2015. She reached out to me last year. She she completely changed her life. She turned it around. She moved out west. She got married. She actually finished college. She was doing all this other
Wow.
stuff. Like she really made positive strides in her life because at the time I told her, I was like, you need God, you need Jesus. I was like, you need something.
Hmm.
And I gave her holy water, gave her rosary beads. I'm just like, we need to get rid of this attachment. And, not to
Wow.
say I was able to completely eradicate it from her, but clearly whatever happened, because I think she was going through some dark times. She was using cocaine and doing some other extracurricular activities that weren't positive.
Hmm.
I found out she started working as an escort at the time. And I guess she basically must have really just introduced some really negative and bad stuff into her life.
Yeah.
But I'm glad, ultimately it actually worked out for her. So,
Hmm.
and
Yeah, man.
that's another thing. Like even like Alex and I talk about, we're just trying to help everybody on their spiritual journeys. I'm not saying we know anything. Like there's so much more that we need to learn too.
Hmm.
That's kind of what the
And
show's really about, is like if we could be a resource to people to help them to move from point A to point B, like that's sort of our life's mission.
Yeah.
yeah,
So, you
yeah,
know,
That's awesome, man.
and get
just
them to
want to
laugh a
help the
little bit in the
world.
meantime,
Yeah,
you know,
have fun along the way.
or
Yeah,
have a
we're
little
we're
Yeah,
fun.
learning
exactly.
we're learning and having fun. Yeah, man. Alex, have you had experiences like this? Have you seen things like when not being on ayahuasca and stuff like that? Have you had experiences?
No, but not as such, but being on the other side with um I could talk about the other world through the psychedelics. I mean, a different one was a mushroom journey where I went on where you get to meet. And what's interesting is they're trying to map the psychedelic realm now, to a great extent. I don't know how far they'll get with it. It's a pretty big realm, but um, there's certain commonalities that exist, and it's kind of like it creates a bond between guys who've done psychedelics, not together, but in other places. Because like, oh, did you see that? Oh yeah, I saw that. Did you see that? Yeah. So there's a guy. Um, uh, uh, our second guest, Nestor, called him marketing. He goes, "Did you see marketing?" And I go, "Well, what's marketing?" He goes, "It's the guy that comes and asks you what type of adventure do you want to have." And he goes, and it's like this guy is selling Rolexes on the side of the street in New York City, right? He opens his coat and he's got like Rolexes all down. And he's like, do you want to have a fun experience? You want to have a meaningful thing? You want to learn a lesson? And then he opens up the other coat. It's like the dark side of stuff. They're like, do you want to like see abuse? Do you want to see murder? Do you want to see? And he doesn't care or judge you on what you're seeing. He merely says, go this way for this, go that way for that. And it's a very interesting thing. But apparently he's been seen by many people. Other type
Wow.
of objects like the machine elves
Hmm.
and things like that have been seen by many people. Mostly, I think, what's his name? The McKenna.
Hmm.
Um, he saw most of that. Terrence McKenna, he saw. He made like the machine elves famous and all that stuff. I don't know how many times. I think he did ayahuasca once. He was more of a mushroom and weed guy, but um, again, very interesting. I had an incredible. I think the only spirit per se that's ever really visited me in a way that I can call tangible without really being totally warped, altered, would be tobacco. If I'm by myself and I'm smoking a pipe or having a cigar and just that slow rhythmic movement, it
Hmm.
induces a state in you, not only sort of relaxing, but outside of that, also, um, you commune with it, right? And then you're super quiet, you commune with it, and then you're communing with a larger environment around you. So it can be peaceful, it could be uh just endlessly sort of fascinating in its multifaceted abilities to. But yeah, those spirits, any spirit that I've ever met, it's trying to tell me something, that like teach me a lesson or impart some level of knowledge
Hmm.
or understanding. um
Interesting,
yeah.
man. Interesting. Guys, I think we're getting to the 2 hour mark, so I'm
We
gonna
are,
wrap
yeah,
it
yeah.
up.
Sorry,
But
it's been
I've
a while.
absolutely loved talking to you tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'd love to
Likewise.
get
Same.
you back on. I'd love to talk to you more because I feel like there's more we can talk about. I'm going to be checking out your show, and I'm going to
Please.
add the links in the show description so people can find you guys as well. But it's been a blast, man. You've taught me a lot tonight, and thank you so
Uh,
much.
Absolutely the same. Couldn't thank you enough for the opportunity. Love making a new friend,
It's been a pleasure,
and
man.
we'll be in touch, man. Thanks again.
Yeah,
Thank
it
you.
was truly a pleasure joining you tonight, and thank you so much for
It's been
having us
awesome.
on.
Thank you very much, man. I've loved it. Can you tell the listeners where they can find you guys?
Yeah, we're on YouTube. We're on Spotify at Brothers of the Arcana. Just give us a quick search. We have a page on YouTube. We also have a page on Spotify, iTunes, also Apple Podcasts, Rumble. Although we gotta update that a little bit more.
Yeah,
Um,
we're a little
and
behind on Rumble right
we
now.
also do shorts of the show on YouTube Shorts and on TikTok. So we have that. And maybe you can find us on Instagram. We put up stuff, but it seems to make no difference. No one cares on Instagram what we post. Um, yeah, but that's it. So that's us in a
Awesome.
nutshell.
Well, I'm going to be listening, guys. You've sold it to me. I'm going to be there
Thank you
100%.
so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you
that a
so
lot.
Appreciate
much.
it.
Let's do it again. Keep an eye out for the drones. Let us know if there's anything else happens because I feel like there's going to be a lot more happening in the next few days because it seems to be a
Absolutely.
growing subject. But thank you so
100%.
much, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure. Let's do it again soon. Guys,
Absolutely.
Pleasure.
thank you
God
so
bless.
much for listening. If you've enjoyed the episode, share it where you can. Make sure you give 5 stars to both of our podcasts. That helps us out massively. It gets us out there to more people that enjoy these conversations. And we'll be back very soon for more freaky conversations. But in the meantime, stay safe, look out for drones, keep it freaky, and bye for now. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.
Bye.